Yeah, cheers, Adam. Cheers for coming on, mate.
It's all right, no problem at all.
So how have you been keeping then?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been a funny few months, isn't it, actually? But actually really enjoyable, to be fair, in some instances, and being able to take your foot off the gas and just really appreciate everything you've got, I suppose, at your house and the free things to do, which is go out, have some nice walks, get on the bike. And luckily, we had some nice weather to go with it, so that helped.
It's looking all right today, to be fair. It was raining.
Yeah. I know. I hate to be hot the next couple of days.
Yeah.
Good.
So, do you keep yourself fit, or?
Yeah, well, I have to, because our problem is I still eat like I would back when I played. I got no choice. I tend to train 6 o'clock most mornings, as well as go on a lot of walk, get on the bike, still play cricket, golf, play a little bit of ice hockey now and again as well, like non-contact stuff. So yeah, that keeps you fit all the time.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah. Do you almost crave that competition still?
Yeah, that's why I do it. Yeah. Because you can. There's lots of parts of rugby I don't miss, but then it's the competition side of it, especially if you do. You never lose that. You don't make it into professional sport, whatever sport that will be, unless you've got that competitive edge to you. You've got to have it, and you don't just lose it with stop playing. You find most people who retire will always try and find something to replace it with.
Yeah. I'll take you right back to the start, mate. You made your Dragons debut in 2010. Was it against Cardiff?
Yeah, it was quite a big one. It was the Blues at home. It was back when Rodney Parade had the old Argus stand, and it was completely full. It was straight into the fire, really. So it was good fun. I remember it actually like yesterday. I think my first touch of the ball, I got smashed in the face in the touch as I went to, I guess, I can't remember who it was, maybe Molotika or something. But yeah, that was my introduction into it. Really.
Yeah, what was that? Did you come off the bench? Was it, or did you?
Yeah. No, I come off the bench. It was about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes to go or something like that. So there's nothing worse than being sat on the bench either, because when you start, you're straight in the game, you don't worry about it. But when you're sat on the bench, you're just sat there worrying, like, when am I going on, what am I going to do when I get on, etc. And the fact that it was my first appearance in a local derby as well, the biggest game of the season, made it even more nerve-wracking. But it all went well, and I started the following week against the Ospreys.
It's another big game, really, you've got to think.
Oh, yeah. I was up against Shane Williams. I was up against Shane Williams that day. And that's when he was like in his prime, where he was probably one of the best players in the world. So it was a real introduction into.
What was that like, as a young man playing against one of the best in your second game?
You just got to stick to what you coached, really. Don't go out and try and force anything or try and become some sort of superstar overnight. Stick to the defensive protocols, especially with him. If you go out and try and tackle Shane Williams one-on-one, you're going to get beaten. So you've got to work together as a team. And we actually performed really well. I think we lost, but we performed really well that game.
It was obviously your first couple of games, so I think you're just trying to make your first impact. Was it hard to break into the team at the time?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we had some really good players. Probably sort of late 2008 to 2010. It was really good players in that team. But luckily, I managed to learn off them as well, and that really helped. We would very rarely lose a home game at that stage. So Rodney Parade was a real fortress and real good to play in front of as a youngster. Because the amount of support you got as well. And you knew that every team that came there wasn't really that keen on being there. So you almost had like the upper hand from the start. It's a shame it's not really like that anymore, unfortunately, but back then it really was. Yeah,
definitely, because I know might get told off a bit, but I had this Osprey season ticket for a while.
Okay.
I don't anymore, but it's my dad's side of the family are all up there. But it was always the biggest game for us, because obviously we're local down here. We'd go to that one. That would be our big game. But I went to that Ospreys game, in all fairness. But we talk about breaking into the team. Now isn't there like some sort of transition squad with the Dragons at the minute? It's like
it's all very different now. So back when I did it, it was you went into the academy at 16, you work your way up, and then if you kept improving, they keep you on every year. And then it was Paul Turner at the time. If he thinks you're good enough, he just chucks you straight in and you either sink or swim. Whereas these days, it's much more of a prolonged approach, whereby you play your age grade, and then you're sort of 18 rugby, and then potentially you have like a couple of transition games, and then you get put into the first team. So they're a lot more cautious. Whereas back then, it was a case of, if you think he's good enough, just chuck him in, give him a go. And I think that would work quite well for a few players, and it doesn't work out quite well for others.
Did you almost need that pressure of, this is your chance?
Yeah, you do. Because sometimes you can string it out too long. Sometimes it's better just to see, like, is he good enough or not to give him a chance. It is tough because you can sometimes get judged on 1 or 2 games. It might just be an off game for you, and then that's your career almost gone for some people. But some people make the most of it. We look at Tom Pridey, for example. What was he, 17, 18? They chucked him straight into the Welsh squad, and he did well, and he's done well off it ever since. So I think it works for some players, not for others.
Yeah, no. Around that sort of same time, though, wasn't there? Were you in part of that under-20 squad that had loads of different Welsh stars, or were you just before, or just after?
No, we had a really good. I say we had a really good 20s team. We had great players, but we didn't actually do that well. I think we only won a couple of games in Six Nations. We did pretty average in the World Cup, but so many of them went on to play for Wales.
Who was in that squad? Who was in the squad when you were there?
I'm just trying to think. The backline would have been Gareth Davis and Lloyd Williams at 9, Bigger at 10, Beck and Scott Williams in the centres, myself on the wing with Christian Phillips. I think James Loxton was full-back. So, as a backline goes, that was really good. And so many of those boys went on to play top-level rugby, but we just didn't actually do that well as a team, funny enough.
How close did you come to getting a Wales call-up?
I had the call for the Australia tour, which was 2012, I think it was, maybe, when they played the Barbarians before, and unfortunately never went, and he actually got on the pitch because I had an injury in the last game, so I never actually made training. But I had the call, so I knew they were thinking about me. Go over that white line, unfortunately.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking that probably, especially from the Dragons, there are a few players probably around that time. You look at probably Jason Tevu, Ashley Smith, and Lewis Evans. You never really got that game time for Wales at all.
No, it's a shame because that you're talking about players that should definitely have had caps, but fortunately, international coaches do select players from winning teams, and we were taught that. Remember, Rob Baxter at Exeter was always very, very keen on that, saying, if we become a successful winning team, a lot of you players will end up playing for England, and that's what happened with those guys. Fortunately, we just weren't winning enough games. Say like the Ospreys, for example, and the Ospreys were the best team in Wales, and the Ospreys had the most amount of players in the Welsh squad, so that's how it worked.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like you should have moved the Dragons then, maybe to look for your chance in the Welsh squad? Having said that,
well, the thing is that everything was going so well for me personally at the Dragons. All you want when you're young is game time, and I was playing every single week, 80 minutes a week. And get as much game time and exposure as I wanted. My issue was probably about 2 or 3 years into my career when I started picking up my head injuries. And you look back now, it was like a gradual fall from there, whereby I just lost my confidence over the seasons. But what I did do is, when I really started to struggle, was move down to Exeter Chiefs and Bristol, which for me was an amazing move because I really got to experience different clubs, what it's like in the English Premiership. How professional the teams can be, how they approach it. I got to play with some of the best players in the world. So the absolutely great experiences. And then I ended up coming back to the Dragons then towards the end of my career, and everything started off very well. Then again, I was playing every single week. But unfortunately, the head injuries just never really went away.
So, how could you remember certain injuries? Could you remember it feeling hurtful or painful?
The concussions aren't really painful. It's not a pain. It's just more of an anxious feeling because you are doing damage which could potentially be irreversible, and that's where you knock your confidence. Because I was never the biggest rugby player, so I always had to go in sort of as low as I can, as hard as I can, to try and make any sort of impact, which meant I was putting my head on the line probably more than most. And when you start doubting yourself when you have to go in for those sort of tackles, you end up not being as effective, and that's probably what happened over the years. Yeah,
no, I think I was the same. I wouldn't call it concussion, but I remember the last game I ever played when I was about 17. I got knocked out, and it was a mad story really because we were playing a touring Canadian school, and we had to keep a couple of we had to bring in some of the players into our home for a few days while they were here. And it was literally the player I brought in that knocked me out. Yeah, I think the outside half kicked the ball through. I went through to dive on it, as I've gone to dive, he's gone to kick it and need me in the side of the face, and something like that. It was one of them things I said, it didn't hurt, but that's what my question was, because I didn't feel anything.
No, you don't. The thing is that because you don't feel it, because you don't see anything, A, you don't really recognise it, and B, no one else recognises it, because if somebody's concussed, you just look at them, they look absolutely like you could be concussed right now and I wouldn't know. That's the problem. It is an invisible injury, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about them. Some people get lucky and go through careers and they say they haven't had concussion, and other people just struggle with them really badly. It's unfortunately nothing you've got any control over either.
It seems to happen a lot nowadays, though. Like it didn't.
It's probably because the contacts in rugby are getting a lot bigger because everyone's getting bigger, faster, and stronger. But also people are more aware of it. So back in the day, so even when I started the Dragons in 2010, probably it was like, okay, where are you? What's the score? If you got them pretty close, you were allowed to carry on. But these days, obviously, you've got to go through a lot more sort of severe tests, and you've got to go off the pitch, speak to the doctors. We're just a lot more aware of it now. I'm probably diagnosing what was probably not seen as concussion back then as concussion now.
Because it's happening to a lot of players, like you said, the game's developing, everyone's faster, fitter, stronger, bigger, fundamentally. So tackles becoming more like powerful.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of players that have good players like yourself who've just had to. It's been taken out of their hands. What was that like to be taken out of your hands?
In a way, it's almost a good thing because then I've not got to sit down and make the hard decision. And the problem is a lot of guys, if they get given the decision in their own hands, will sometimes take the wrong one for the wrong reasons. Whether that's just because they think they'll miss it too much, or because they'll miss the salaries. For example, you look at your high, real high-paid international players. It's going to be a lot harder for them to pack it in, knowing what they're giving up. So sometimes it is better for somebody else to say, look, it's out of your hands, you can't play anymore, and then you just got to accept it. There's no sort of ambiguity there then.
That's me, because where's the line drawn? Because you see people like George North's probably a perfect example. He's had so many huge ones, and live on TV in front of millions, so everybody's seeing it, and he just seems to carry on. Where does the line?
Well, that's what I mean. From what I just said, he's one of those players who is going to be earning a lot of money. It's going to be a much tougher choice for him, knowing what he's going to be giving up forever, because he's no going back to it once you make that decision. He's one, somebody who should probably have hung his boots up a few seasons ago after those huge knocks. And fingers crossed he will be okay in the future and into retirement. But if you were going to be on the safe side, he probably should have hung his boots up a few seasons ago. But it would be a lot more difficult for somebody like him to make that decision.
Yeah. Well, I sort of talked to you, like you briefly touched upon it, you move away from the Dragons going to Bristol and Exeter. Was that just purely for a new opportunity, or was there?
No, it was just so we had a few changes of coaches at the Dragons. Paul Turner went, Darren Edwards came in, and then Lynn Jones came in. And it was all very much change. It wasn't like it was when I started there. I felt myself starting to get a bit stale, so I need a new opportunity. Very luckily, I'd played well against Exeter Chiefs in Europe a few seasons before, so I knew Baxter was keen to sign me. So we approached him, and that was all done and dusted. That was great, so that was signed up for the following season. And then we said to Bristol, look, I want a bit of game time. Is you got anything coming, anything available? And they said, yeah. So I went there for about 5-6 months before I joined Exeter. And that was one of the best decisions I ever made, because that's probably that 5 months was one of the most enjoyable parts of my rugby career.
Why was that? Was it just the team you were around?
It was something that was very new. I was playing at a team that was winning every week. Great facilities. My first week with Bristol, we spent in Portugal in a training camp. At Browns, so that was all very nice. Opened my eyes to how other clubs operate. It's not always, the Dragons was quite tough at times. It was not even on the training ground, so that was a bit of eye-opening to me. And it's just a great set of lads, a great stadium to play in, the Memorial Ground in Bristol, and just everything about it was very positive. Unfortunately, they didn't get promoted that year, but it didn't really matter too much to me because I was going to Exeter anyway. Yeah,
was that the same sort of time that a lot of the Welsh players started to go there as well? Was there a few there when you were there?
What's that? Sorry,
because when they sort of that time that a few players from the Welsh regions
Yes, that would go. Yeah, so Ryan Jones joined us for the playoffs, and came in straight away as captain. I think he broke his ankle or something in the first game, but he came in, and then I think Gareth Moore came over there just after I did. There's like 4 or 5 Welshies over there.
A few, didn't there, that sort of went over.
Yeah, because I think it was Sean Holly was the coach, so he was sort of the influence on the Welsh guys. Over there, he brought a few of them over, but you had Andy Robinson then was head coach, and obviously World Cup winning coach with England, so he knew his stuff, and they're just great people to learn off.
What was it like learning from like Andy Robinson and stuff? Who'd obviously
brilliant. Yeah, it's quite surreal. You think you're only a kid and you're watching people like him on TV winning the World Cup. Next thing you know, you're sat in his office signing a contract. So but it's great. You've got to understand how much these guys know and what they've been through and the people they've dealt with, and you've got to listen and just soak up everything they tell you.
Obviously, somebody who's played at the highest level. We talk about high-level coaching from the likes of Andy Robinson. What does it differ? I know it's obviously a massive difference playing your youth team rugby, where it's all for fun. Where does it sort of change where it sort of becomes, right, it's all for fun now, rugby, now we're going to start getting serious?
That was probably, I reckon, about 18, so about the under 18s, like regional A grade stuff, was when it really started to get serious, when it wasn't just about the on-pitch stuff, you really digging into the off-field stuff as well, when that'd be conditioning, so your nutrition, and just making sure everything, your analysis starts going through the roof. Then you spend a lot of time doing that. But you wouldn't believe how many hours goes into a Saturday afternoon game for a team. It's mind-blowing.
So what's your normal Saturday on a game day? What would it be?
Well, the Dragons, we were quite lucky. We had Friday nights, didn't we? Usually kicking off on a Friday night, which is great because you've got a weekend to yourself then. But what does become quite annoying is the late kickoffs, because you can't really do anything on that day, especially in a away game. But usually pre-game, I just try and treat it like any normal day. Get out, my little dog, just hang around the house, and all you're trying to do is plan around your meals. So your meals are the most important thing leading up to, especially an evening game. So just get a few big meals in. I always have a meal just before I left the ground. So I always just like to get to the ground nice and early. But I just try and be as chilled out as I could, which is quite strange sometimes on an evening kickoff, and I can really make the day slow down. But fortunately, there's nothing to do about them.
Were all your teammates like that, or were there some that were a bit mad in the change room?
You get a right mix of people. Yeah, you get people who go around headbutting the walls and slapping you on the back and that sort of stuff. And then you got I sit down even with just music in or just reading a program, for example. But I always like to be first out on the pitch and warm up. Don't know why. I just like to get out of the changing room and run around.
Just to get away from it.
Yeah, because some people will just sit in the changing room like almost the entire time, but not for me. I like to get out there and soak it all up.
No, I always remember you had the scrum cap on, didn't you? That's what I always remember from you. And for some reason, when I was probably about 10 or 11, you just seemed to score all the time. That's why I always remember you as a player. So, am I right in saying you're a pilot as well? I always seem to remember that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I got my pilot's license when I was 19, 20, I think I was, and that was good because I did a Scrum 5 appearance with Phil Steele. You might have seen
what I saw. I think.
Loads of people still bring that up. So that was good fun, and people really like that. And I found for myself that's my biggest switch off. Some people just love rugby and want to think about it 24/7, but for me, it's quite the opposite. I really wanted to come home and switch off. And doing things like flying was perfect for me.
Was that just a fun thing? Was that your choice to get away from it?
Yeah, it was something I had in the long-term plan, was to become a pilot after rugby. So it was like part of the process. But I started it when I did because it just takes your mind off things and allows you to completely switch off.
So are you still able to fly, or does you?
I can still fly the smaller aircraft.
Okay.
I was not able to go on and continue to be a commercial pilot because of the head injuries, which is a bit annoying, but one of those things, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. So was that always what you wanted to be? I know you said some players always want to play rugby. Was rugby a dream, or did you want to be a pilot?
Well, when I was a little kid, I didn't really play rugby when I was a little kid. So I always wanted to be a pilot. And then when I got into comprehensive school, when I started playing rugby, and then rugby just takes over your life. And you don't want to be, once you start getting a taste of what it's like, rugby's all you want to do. When you start playing like the Welsh age grade stuff and the regional academies, actually, I'll put everything I've got into this. And fortunately, it worked out.
I know, because I didn't realise until when I went to comprehensive school how serious it actually is taken. Because in school are like usually ex-players or something. I know one of our coaches, Mr. Sav, he coached at Bath, and he was one of the people who turned Matt Banahan from a second row to a wing. And you look what he went and done. That's why is his claim to fame. I think is a few of them.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well, he was a tough winger to play against. He was. Because the hardest thing was trying to defend the crossfield kick against him, because he's about a foot taller than most people. So that was always a fun one. But which school did you go to?
I went to Killeen.
I thought it was. Yeah.
I remember there's been a few Dragons players that came from our school. So I remember. What's that, sorry?
Yeah, there has been quite a few.
Yeah, I think Ashley Smith's one of them, actually.
Yeah.
But I remember when we were in year 7, our like year 11s at the time got to like the Welsh Cup final. So it was at the Park of Scarlet. So literally everybody went, like the whole school went. I'm thinking, looking back at that team, there was Tyler Morgan in that team, Ashton Hewitt, Angus O'Brien. Yeah. So
all three of them.
Yeah, all three of them. That's what I always remember them playing. It's like you look back at that. That must have been 9 years ago. 9 years ago. Yeah. Well, they've all gone to do so. That's what I'm saying. The school had a bit of a reputation for developing players, but I think our year sort of ruined that a bit. But I think the year above us had a couple, but
not your year.
No, I don't think actually. No, I know the year above us have had a few that I think they're in that transition. But I know our year was like the only year that didn't win like the Newport Cup. We got to the final in the semi-final, but we lost to Baysleg, and I think they had like Aaron Wainwright in their team at some point. And,
did they?
Yeah,
right.
He's a couple of years older than me, but I think he might have played against us a couple of times. But it's weird thinking about stuff like that.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It just happens overnight for some guys.
Yeah, do you miss like the school rugby? Do you miss, because that was always like what I loved?
Yeah, no, it was great. Because you're playing with your mates, aren't you? You're really close mates. And I went to Crossy Killioch School, and again, we had a very good team. I think we got through to the semi-finals of the Welsh Cup, and we went about 2 or 3 years unbeaten. And that was great. So we could play two games a week. You wouldn't feel a thing. You could play every day of the week if you wanted. Whereas now you play one game, you want 2 weeks off when you get to your sort of mid-20s, late 20s. But yeah, it was great fun. If you mix in your school rugby with your club rugby as well, that was great.
Yeah. So, did you like the transition from it being fun and playing with your mates to it being a bit more serious? Because that doesn't happen for a lot of people, does it?
No, it does at the start. It's great because it's all brand new and it's all very fun and it's a big experience. But you look back on it now and you see rugby and how rugby is played. Rugby is very sort of methodical now. You've got to stand here, do this, run here, pass at this point. The actual flair side of it at the top level sort of taken away, and that's just purely down to how good defences are now. You look at footage from back in the great 70s era. The defences just weren't a thing. You could sometimes just have 2 or 3 people trying to defend 30 metres or people flying at the line. That just does not happen anymore, and it's so much harder to break down a defence. So that's why rugby has to become a lot more methodical, and I think that's taken a lot of the enjoyment away from it. A, playing, and B, watching, and that's what you find. I found towards my later career when that really started kicking in, it just wasn't as fun as it used to be.
So you say it sort of became less fun. Would there have been a time soon after that you would have retired anyway without your head injury? Say you would have been...
Oh no, don't get me wrong. I must say it was always a dream job to do. But you're just trying to compare what it was like at the start to at the end. How rugby was played, and even in just that 6-7 year gap had changed quite significantly, and that is all down to defences and how good defences are.
How good? You said you're a small player. Did that almost come into your advantage in a way? Because I know players I played with that were maybe on the shorter side often were actually the best at tackling. I don't know if that was...
Yeah, I think it did because I knew I had to go into everything 100%, so I did. And I absolutely loved it. The contact side of rugby was something I thrived upon. What I enjoyed most. And I think that's why it had the biggest effect on me, is because that's what got taken away from me with the head injuries, probably more than anything. I had everything else remained the same. It's just I lost the ability to really sort of fly into contacts like I used to.
Is that, you say flying into contacts, is that, when you said when you had your concussions, it affected you, you became nervous and stuff. How did you cope with that then, to be able to keep putting in the big hits?
A lot of it is you work with psychologists. So, you try and alleviate the fears that you may have in the back of your mind when you play. But they're always there. I remember games when you're playing against. It's hard to explain how big some of these French teams are. It's quite unbelievable. You're going up against those, and if you've ever got any doubt in your mind when you're trying to play against those guys, you're always going to come off second best. And that's when you've got to be really honest with yourself and think, say, look, am I still doing myself justice by being out here or not? And that's when you've got to ask yourself the question then about whether you still carry on playing.
Who was your toughest opponent then? Not necessarily the best, but the one you looked at. You said you're playing on the weekend and you thought, I'm up against him.
I don't know really. I've been asked that question as well about who's the best player you played against, and it's always a real tough one. I think I always say Brian O'Driscoll's the best, not necessarily because he played the best against we played him, but he is just one of the best players I've ever played against in general. But I tell you, one winger I always used to hate going up against was a guy called Snotty Sonotti. I think he plays for Newcastle now. Very short Islander winger, but he's got the smallest pair of legs you've ever seen, but his feet are just unbelievable and you can't tackle him. I think the first time I played against him, I went to go in quite low against him. He just stuck his fist out and fractured my eye socket. And it's just nothing you can. I was thinking, okay, he's like trying to tackle a brick wall. Really, really tough guy to play against. But just to watch him is quite impressive.
Talk about watching players. Who was your favourite player growing up that made you think? Because everybody's had their own player. But you thought, I like.
Yeah, I tell you who my favourite player was growing up was Hal Luscombe.
Oh really?
Yeah, it was Hal Luscombe because he played for the Dragons, then he played for Wales. He had a scrum cap on as well, didn't he? just like I did. But yeah, he was the player I liked most growing up.
That's fair enough. Because I remember watching Hal Luscombe because I've got the 2005 Grand Slam DVD and watched that a million times, and he's always on that.
Yeah, he is. He had a really good couple of years, didn't he?
Funny story about that tournament. On the TV at the moment, they've been showing the Scrum 5 Classics.
They're good,
yeah, they've been good, haven't they? So I think it was Wales. It might have been Wales. It was Wales France from 2005, and Brent Cobain's playing, and my mum thought his name was Kurt Cobain.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Literally going to us, my mum's going, "Oh, Kurt Cobain's playing." No,
it's mad. He literally just disappeared off the face of the earth. When he left.
Didn't his brother play for Australia as well? They were both Australian. I think his brother played.
Yeah, he was Australian. I think he went back to Australia and just no one ever heard his name again. But you look at that 2005 team, there's some great names in
there. Yeah, who was, when you first got into the Dragons team, who was the player that you thought, wow, I'm sort of amongst them here?
Colin Chavez, probably. He was a bit of a legend back in the day. So the backs wise, we had a couple of Kiwis who, Danny Lee played for New Zealand. As an all back, he's somebody who it's, when you play with him, you're like, Christ, this guy's obviously pretty good at what he does. To have an all black cap, and you just got to learn off those guys. You've got to sit there. Sometimes you got to keep your mouth shut and just taking everything.
That's what I was going to say. Did you learn much from them? What was your learning process? Did you speak to them, or did you, like you said, just keep your mouth shut and listen to what they said?
I just listen to what they say. I was quite lucky. The late Matthew Trey Watkins as well, who was obviously a top quality player, came in, and as a centre as well, the same as him. He was a brilliant person to learn off. And you talk about somebody who made rugby look easy. That was him. So he's somebody who I like to watch and especially play with.
Would he be your favourite player to play with? would you say?
He probably, he to be fair to him, probably put me away in the corner more players than anyone else. And you can't thank anyone enough for that. I scored so many easy tries off the back of it, which is great.
Was your preferred position centre then? Because I often saw you on the wing.
Bit of a mix, really. I didn't really mind either one. You know, at the end of the day, when you in open play, you pretty much play anywhere anyway. It's just in defence is when you really get the difference between centre and wing, because 13 is the most difficult position on the field to defend from, because you're the most exposed. So that, you know, that's one time where the centre can become quite difficult. Whereas in the winger role is more about just covering the backfield and making that decision whether they come up or not. But I quite like the challenge of both, to be honest.
Yeah, was that? Did you always play? This is something I always think of. Did you always play when you were a youngster, centre or wing, or were you somewhere else when you played?
No, I started off as a 12, really. So I played Wales on the 16s as a 12. I gradually moved out. I played a little bit of 10. I gradually moved out then 13 winger. I played fullback as well, a bit for the Dragons, a bit everywhere, and I was happy to do that. And I did not mind that at all. I even had a stint at scrum half in against in the European game, so no, I was more than happy. You know, I wasn't one of these people that wanted just to, you know, stick my flag into one position, because, you know, I find if you allow yourself to be a bit more mobile, you're more selectable to the coaches as well.
That just for yourself to get game time as well. You thought, I'll play wherever.
Yeah, you don't know. There is a downside to it, because then you become you don't become a master of anything. You know, that's when people see it, they view it that way. So there are downsides to it, but I just thought to myself, you know, I like the challenge of trying out new positions. The coaches at the time were happy with me to do it, so I just went along with it.
Yeah, you know, who would you say, probably more so as well in your earlier days at the Dragons, that you looked at and probably wasn't a star then, but has gone on to be a big star? Who did you think then? Or who didn't, rather?
I'll tell you one player who really kicked on from sort of when he was in the academy days was Ashton Hewitt. You know, he was a young guy in the academy. We all knew he was very quick. But, you know, there are people saying, what's he like with the ball in hand? And he burst onto the scene, and he's now an excellent rugby player, a really good all-rounder. So he's done really well from somebody who was young when I was still in the team. And then you look at Wainwright. You know, you talk about an overnight success. You know, somebody who was playing probably Division 2, Division 3 stuff, playing for a uni. Next thing you know, he's playing for Wales the following year. You know, which goes to show you, right time, right place. It can happen very, very quickly.
Would you say the Dragons are becoming a good team then for young players? Because there are a lot at the minute, aren't they?
It is a good breeding place for youngsters, because they will get opportunities. But what you tend to find is they do move away after a while, and that's what they've got to stop. They've got to try and make it a place where when players turn into good international players, is where they want to stay rather than leave. And part of that is money, and there's obviously a lot more difficult for them to sort that situation out. But they've also got to make it somewhere where players enjoy playing.
And that's with like the dual contracts with WRU. Is that probably why? Because there are some players that are filtering back to the Dragons. Who, like Hibbard's come back there. Jamie Roberts has just signed, hasn't he? There's some David Howells. You know, there's a few that have come back. Is that just a big contract though?
The biggest challenge for the Dragons was you needed that one big player to come back for then the others to come back, and they did that with Moriarty, and they paid through the nose for it. Because they had to, because you're not going to get, if you had the Dragons offering the same amount as, say, Wasps, for example, they're always going to go Wasps. So you've got to pay nearly double that for them to come to the Dragons, and they really had to sort of put their money where their mouth was to get that first big player in. And then, like you've seen, another one follows, and another one, and they think, right, if he's there, it must be a good club, so I'm going to go there as well. You have that sort of effect, and luckily that's what's happening there.
Is money almost taken over rugby now? Because it was never, like we said, it wasn't always a professional sport. But
no. Money has gone stupid in rugby over the last 5 years. This COVID situation will bring it down a peg or two, which, even though it's very tough for the players who are now playing, it needed to happen, because it was getting carried away. You know, you're talking boys getting paid hundreds and hundreds of thousands when the clubs are just not making the money to be able to pay those salaries, because problem is you even see, use the Dragons for example, crowds have gone down over the years, but salaries have exponentially gone up, and the two just don't match. So something needed to happen. Unfortunately, a world pandemic isn't ideally what you would have wanted to happen, but it probably will bring salaries back down to a fairly reasonable level now.
It was the thing is, you look at the likes of the Sonny Bill. I know it's rugby. He's rugby league now, but Sonny Bill Williams. I saw something. He's like something like a £6 million contract at Toronto. It's like something job for rugby, isn't it?
Yeah, it's problem. You're always going to get the odd one or two who will just get paid unbelievable amounts of cash, but they're just going to be funded by private investors or directors of these clubs. They're not going to be paid for through a normal business model, because someone like he signed for in Canada just would not generate the amount of money needed for salaries like that. So you're always going to get some clubs who have a very wealthy director who just stump up the money for a star name like that. But the problem is when you've got your squad players, for example, all on six figures, that's when clubs really start to suffer then, because you just can't afford to pay 50, 60 guys that much money. When you're only generating money from 5,000 to 10,000 people every other week in your stadium.
You think there should be a bit more of a salary cap then? And then, like you said, appearance bonuses?
Yeah, well, it seems to be working fairly well in England, even though they are reducing their salary cap now, aren't they, going forward, which is good, which is really good. I know they have the marquees as well, so they do have the ability to pay big money to certain players. But I think reducing the salary cap was a very good move for England. But it's a sensible one, but from the outside, you probably think, why? Because their stadiums are full, they get very good TV deals, it's a great product, and they're reducing their salary cap, which goes to show you how stupid salaries got over the last sort of 5 years. They needed to be calmed down, because as much as it's great that all the players deserve every penny they get, because they are absolutely hammering their bodies every week. But there needs to be some sort of sustainable model in place for the future.
I think Saracens are a good example of that. They obviously got relegated due to their salary thing. But what I do like about Saracens now is that a lot of those players have stayed to play in the Championship next year.
Yeah, and that's what I go back to when I say about the Dragons. You need to make it a place where players want to play, where it's not just about the money. Unfortunately, the Dragons have to stump up the money in the first instance to get the players, but now they should try and make it a place where they can pay players a little bit less than that, but then it's somewhere they want to stay because they just enjoy it, and that's exactly what Saracens do. Nobody says Saracens pay crazy amounts of money for everyone, but they just make it a place where they look after the players and their families, and players are happy to stay. Yeah.
So I want to go off topic a little bit. I read somewhere that you do a bit of refereeing. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah.
What's that like? 'Cause it's not the same as playing, but you still get that buzz almost.
Yeah. Well, yeah, without doubt. I initially took it up just to try and keep fit, because you do run around most weeks, and it stops you putting the sort of post-rugby career weight on. But it's great for me. I'm going around all the old clubs I used to play at when I was a kid, meeting everyone. And don't get me wrong, I don't have to get some stick now and again, but it's all part of it. I was very lucky. I've refereed a few cup finals at the Millennium Stadium already, which is great experience as a referee, and I hadn't done it as a player as well. But I really enjoy it, and it's probably something I'm going to continue doing now over the next few years, and just seeing where I get to on that.
Do you want to try and progress into the Pro 14 maybe?
I'd love to see how far it goes. There are some very good referees in Wales at the moment. So it's not a case of just because you're an ex-player you're going to be forced right up because got to get to the back of the queue. I have got a leg up the fact that I have played professional rugby, and that does sort of lend itself to probably understanding the game a bit more than somebody who hasn't, obviously. But it's still a case of I've got to work my way up from the bottom to the top.
So as a referee now, what is your take on head injuries should a player go down during a game?
It's quite worrying because, especially at the lower levels, lower leagues, is whenever I see a head injury, I will just tell somebody, off you go, and you're not coming back on again. But it's quite worrying how many times club coaches and club physios argue with me to say that he's okay, why are you sending him off, he's absolutely fine. Well, I've clearly just seen him be knocked out. Luckily I'm in a position whereby if they question me, I can just tell them exactly. I've been through it myself. I know probably more than most how it feels and the ramifications of it. But what is worrying is how many players I see want to carry on after a head injury, especially at the lower level. I think that's where we've got to really educate coaches and physios down at that level and players about the after effects of concussion, really.
Why do you think that is, though? Because there obviously is so much more awareness, like especially in the past couple of years. Is it just an ego thing, do you think?
Yeah, rugby is still part of that, hard, how hard are you tight, concussion back when I played sort of age grade rugby, 2008, 2009, it was like if you went off with a concussion, the coaches would frown upon that massively because, you'd be seen as soft. And problem is like everything, it starts at the top and it will dwindle down into the lower leagues. But it's just not really got there yet, and probably education does need to improve and to get rid of that mindset whereby if you go off the concussion, you're soft, because it still does sort of sit around the lower leagues a bit.
When you talk about like lower leagues, I know especially at school level, I know in primary school we weren't allowed to do contact, and then I'd already played like club level anyway for like NHS
yeah.
Then when we went up to comp, it's like there's still like the safety of it, but it's still like enjoyable. Like I said, the game where I got knocked out, I got dragged off. My coach came on and pulled me off.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
You said you're not staying on, you're coming off. Like a bit like what you said. I don't care. You said you were flat out, or you're not coming.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Is still, even though, like you say, when you were playing age grade, it was almost frowned upon. Now there's probably a bit more of awareness that coaches are taking players off.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, most coaches are, as soon as I tell them, look, I've seen him be knocked out, he's got to stay off. Most coaches won't argue. There are a couple that do, and even if it's just 2 or 3, that's way more than it should be anyway. No coach should then argue with the referee when the referee says, look, I've seen one of your players be knocked out, he's not continuing. It should okay, draw a line under it, he's off. It's got to be everything about, even in the lower leagues, it's got to be about the players' best interests. And I know it gets very competitive. I know they play a lot of local derbies, and they always want to beat the other team because they only probably live about 5 miles down the road, and they always want the bragging rights in the pub afterward. But you've got to look at the long-term personal health of that player, because the problem is club rugby is starting to struggle a little bit, mainly because players are worried about getting injured on the weekend and can't work on a Monday. So it's in your responsibility then as a referee and also as a coach to make sure that you're doing the best for those players, so they continue to play club rugby.
So that you almost answered my question then, because I was going to say, a lot of players in the lower leagues have jobs, or most of them would have jobs as well, so it almost affects their life in rugby.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that these guys, a lot of them could be tradesmen, builders, example. If they go around breaking their fingers or their feet or their ankles, they can't work. And these days, in the modern economy, a boss will just tell, right, that's your own fault. I'm not going to continue paying because you went and broke your ankle on a Saturday afternoon. And then they can't pay their mortgages, they have families, and they've got to weigh up the risks. And a lot of people decided that risk is not worth taking anymore. Yeah,
absolutely, mate. So, since you've retired, what has your life been fully with rugby? Like, do you go down to watch the Dragons? Like, what do you do now as a career? Do you supervisor, is it?
Yes, I'm a financial advisor at Niche. And Niche are one of the sponsors at the Dragons. So I go down a couple of times a year, maybe 2 or 3 times a year to the Dragons. I don't go down anywhere near as much as I thought I would. Because once you get out of that rugby bubble, you start to realise there's a lot more to life than just rugby. I find myself quite busy with other things, but I always keep an eye on what they're doing and how they're getting on. If they're on TV, I'll watch it. But it'd be quite interesting to see now that they're back in Europe, back in the Heineken Cup. I'll definitely go down to those games and it'd just be great to see them become successful and just see Rodney Parade bouncing again, really.
So how much do you enjoy it as a fan, obviously being an ex-player?
I probably, as a fan, I probably don't watch that much rugby, to be honest. I really enjoy it as a referee because you're in the mix and so you've got that buzz and you're part of the game. But as a fan, I probably don't really go down and watch much rugby at all.
That's great, mate. I think that's probably answered all my questions, to be honest.
That's all right.
Just double checking. Yeah, that's great. Cheers, mate.